left in the window. Will Kylian Mbappe's future be resolved this month? Today, we're joined by European football expert Kevin Hatchard, who will give us his take. Also on the way, Timo Werner is on his way back to the Premier League. Will a move to Tottenham work out for him? No green light for Jadon Sancho just yet. We'll have the latest on his proposed move to Borussia Dortmund. And he's only been in the Saudi Pro League for 6 months, but Jordan Henderson wants a return to the Premier League. We'll assess his options. But first, we're going to get to Chelsea, who are preparing to face Middlesbrough tomorrow night in the EFL Cup semi-final. Let's go live to the club's training ground, where we can join our reporter, James Cole. Hi, James. Mauricio Pochettino has been plagued by injuries this season. How's his side shaping up ahead of this massive game tomorrow?
Hi, Tom. After a dreadful 2023, things are starting to look up slightly for Chelsea as we start 2024. That includes in the medical room, where Ben Chilwell is close to a return. So is Carney Chukwuemeka. Look down the injury list. Also, potentially Mark Cucurella, Christopher Nkunku and Benoit Badiashile. So in terms of injuries, which Chelsea have been plagued with so far this season, things are starting to look slightly better. They're also looking better on the pitch too. Momentum, finally, this season. A bit of momentum for Chelsea. 3 wins in a row in all competitions. Chelsea fans won't get carried away, but this young side have lacked confidence so far this season. They're just starting to get a bit of mojo as they go forward. And the latest win was the 4-0 win over Preston in the FA Cup at the weekend. It was a game of 2 halves, goalless at half-time. Mauricio Pochettino said his side lacked energy in that first half, but they came out after the break, got 4 unanswered goals, including one for Armando Broja too, who's been really low on confidence. That was just his 2nd goal this season. So things are starting to look a bit better for Chelsea. As I say, Chelsea fans won't be getting carried away, but, you know, if they could book themselves into the final of the League Cup as well, suddenly a young side that lacked confidence could be starting to find their way.
Yeah, certainly. And James, you know, this is a transfer show, so let's talk about that. Is it going to be more outgoings in this window for Pochettino, though?
It looks like they're going to have to sell before they buy, doesn't it, Tom? He's been very coy, Pochettino, so far over the last few weeks in terms of transfers. He said last week he was yet to have a formal meeting with the owners as to whether or not they could do any business in this window and what the strategy would be. But given they've spent over £1 billion since May 2022, including 400 million in the last transfer window, it's highly likely they will have to sell before they can buy in order to stay in line with the FFP, Financial Fair Play regulations. Ivan Toney continues to be linked with Chelsea, and I'd imagine Pochettino would have a striker high, if not at the top of his wish list, but it's going to be difficult for them because, as I say, they're likely going to have to sell players first. So whether they can get a striker in this window, we shall see.
James, thank you. Right, we're going to get to Tottenham now because we've got an update. This is just into us here on Transfer Talk. It's about Timo Werner. He's expected to fly to London in the next day or so to begin a medical and complete that 6-month loan move from RB Leipzig to Tottenham. The deal also includes the option to buy him in the summer for around £15 million. Tottenham will pay his salary in full until then, which comes to around £4.3 million. Right, we've got Kevin Hatchard, we've still got Kwaku Afari, Harriet Pryor and Flex as well. Right, Kevin, how would you sum up this spell at RB Leipzig for Werner?
It's been tough for him, there's no doubt about that, because in his first spell with Leipzig, he was scoring lots of goals, very popular player, very much a leader in that team in terms of performance levels. This time it's been a bit more tough because he had a serious injury that ruled him out of the World Cup in Qatar. I think that was a major personal blow for him. And if you look at the pecking order at RB Leipzig, Lois Openda went there in the summer from Lens and has scored lots of goals since going there. So he's been nailed on as one of their 2 strikers. Yusuf Poulsen's been getting lots of games. He's played over 300 games for the club, very much a leader in that dressing room. And Benjamin Šeško is a player they brought in from Salzburg. And I think recently they've got a bit twitchy because they've thought, well, if we're not giving Šeško games, there are lots of Premier League clubs who'd like to swoop in and get him. So we have to keep him and his agent sweet by giving him game time. So that's often left Werner as the odd man out. So while I've still always believed in him as a player and still think that Tottenham could get something out of him, is he in great shape and form at the moment? You'd have to say the answer is no.
And this was a question that was always asked when he was in the Premier League with Chelsea. What is his best position?
I think his best position is as a centre forward, but what we have seen is that he's somebody who can drift wide, can come in off the left, can do damage that way. It's interesting, when Julian Nagelsmann was his coach at Leipzig, he turned him very much into an all-round player, somebody who could create for others as well as score goals. But if you look at that pace, he's got that incredible ability to go in behind, but he can also, since working with Nagelsmann, drop a bit deeper, play between the lines and bring others into play. I think all the gifts are there, the quality is there. It just needs a good coach like Postecoglou to put his arm around him and get a bit of consistency out of him, because I still believe he can be salvaged.
What did you think of him when he was at Chelsea, Kweku?
He was effective. I think that's the most important facet of his game when he was at Chelsea. We expected him to come and be prolific. He wasn't that. He was far from that at Chelsea. Very profligate in front of goal. And you look at the numbers there for Timo Werner in terms of expected goals, 18.54. I mentioned it before. If we didn't exist in a world where VAR was a reality, Timo Werner might have been one of the top scorers in the Premier League. He was the man who played on the edge in terms of on the defensive line. He was giving the opposition big problems in terms of his pacing behind. But his finishing was the biggest issue for Chelsea. Did win the Champions League though. And Chelsea couldn't have won that Champions League without Timo Werner. He dovetailed really nicely with Mason Mount and Kai Havertz as part of a fluid front three, and sometimes he's operating down the middle, sometimes on the left, sometimes he's on the right. He's a man that can follow instructions, but whether he can convert those chances into goals is another thing.
I think the thing is, he's always going to be one of those players. People are going to put reels together of all his misses and say, who is this guy? How has he even managed to get to the top level? But he got 28 Bundesliga goals in the season before he left Leipzig. He scored goals for Germany. As you say, he performed well in that Champions League final. So he's always been a streaky finisher. There's no doubt about that. He's always going to be a guy that will go 6-7 games and you'll think, well, why is he missing all these chances? He's been like that since he was a teenager at Stuttgart. But he'll always get in those positions. He won't go missing. He won't hide.
Is it a confidence thing, Kev?
Absolutely.
Is it a confidence thing? And when you look at somebody like Ange, who's so on the front foot, really backs his players, or if he doesn't back you, he'll let you know as well. But is it a thing that where if he comes in under Ange Postecoglou, he'll put his arm around him, I want you here, mate, get in, get involved here, and he can perform then?
100%. He's always been like that. He's seen a sports psychologist in the past to kind of work on that mental element of things. But as I say, he's a hard worker. His pace causes problems for defenders and opens up space for others. So if you're just looking at the goals, if you're just looking at some of those terrible misses, then you might think there's a player not worth taking a chance on. But I think he is worth taking a chance on, because in the right environment, if you get the best Timo Werner, you've got a really, really good striker there.
You mentioned they're the right environment. I'm interested whether you think Tottenham, in their terms of their style of play, is the right environment for him, because we've seen so many really talented players come to the Premier League, and we saw it at Chelsea, and just struggle to adapt to the pace of it and the style of play. Do you feel like, though, at Tottenham, the style of how they set up will benefit him?
I think so. I think the fact that he's had that spell with Chelsea as well, he knows all about the Premier League now. I don't think that will put him off necessarily. I think Postecoglou wouldn't sign off on the signing if he didn't think there was a specific use for him. As I say, he's got that ability to play a little bit deeper if necessary, and I think that can help Spurs as well. So I think it's all there for him. The big question's just going to be, can they get that regular tune out of him? I hope so, because as a player, I've always really liked him.
Right, I tell you what, we're going to talk about a possible outgoing at Tottenham, because Timo Werner there on your screen, he could be coming in. But Bayern Munich have agreed terms with Eric Dyer. However, he is free to speak to foreign clubs with his contract expiring in the summer. But Tottenham have not had an approach from Bayern yet to discuss a deal to be done this month. OK, so that's an update just into us. Bayern Munich have agreed terms with Eric Dyer, but of course he can go there for free at the end of the season. No contact between Bayern Munich and Tottenham at the moment. Of course, Tottenham would probably prefer to get a bit of money in now rather than wait to let him go for free at the end of the season. But on Dyer himself, Harriet, how much does he need a move?
He's fallen out of favour, hasn't he, at Tottenham? There's been so many conversations around the injury problems and the injury crisis happening at Tottenham, and yet he's sitting on the bench and he's not getting that regular game time. And then you also add to that the interest in Draxler, and if he does come in, then you feel like he would be surplus to requirements. And you look at the fact as well, Emerson Royale, who's not naturally a centre-back, is playing ahead of him. He usually plays in a full-back position. So I do think only 4 appearances in the Premier League this season. His game time is going to be limited. And if he's got the opportunity to go to Bayern Munich, it feels like a huge opportunity for him. Also joining up again with Harry Kane, his good friend, of course. So I do feel like for all parties, this is one that does feel like a good resolution.
Well, that's an update on Dyer. We just have an update on Werner as well. We've also got an update on Tottenham's pursuit of Radu Dragusin. Now, actually, Kevin, just give me the definitive pronunciation of that.
Dragujin.
Dragujin. I can't see that one sticking with me, OK? But you know who I'm talking about. It's from Genoa. However, he's not the only option the club have in this market. According to Sky in Italy, there remains a gap in the club's respective valuations. Sky Germany reporting that Bayern have Dragushin on their list of potential centre-backs as well, but he's not a priority for them as it stands, right? What's he like, Kevin? Tell us more about him.
He's very much a big, strong centre-back, excellent in the air, 6'3". His parents were both internationals. I think his dad was a volleyball player. His mum was a basketball player. So he's got good heritage in that regard. He's a real athlete, strong in the tackle, reads the game well. And not bad on the ball, but that's not his strongest skill set. He is very much a defensive basics guy, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So I can see why clubs are looking at him. I think in Romania he's seen as their big rising star. He was somebody who was on Juve's books. He's gone away with kind of smaller clubs, built up a bit of experience, got the move to Genoa, and that seems to have gone really well. So I can understand why clubs are looking at him. And for somebody who's only 21, he's actually packed a fair bit into a short career. So I think he's a really interesting prospect.
It seems like there is a lot happening at Tottenham at the moment, but Quake, in that centre-back area, how much do you think they need a centre-back?
Andrew's told us how much they need a centre-back. In terms of every press conference he's talked about transfers, he's talked about the need for a centre-back. We know about Eric Dyer potentially leaving the club, and you look at the Spurs' options, Christian Romero, who's great, but perpetually suspended or injured. You look at Mickey van der Ven.
Actually suspended.
Yeah. Mickey van der Ven, who, again, had an amazing start to the season,
signing.
pulled up injured against Chelsea, and they've really missed him as well. Ben Davies has been playing as a faux centre-back, but really, unless you're playing a back three, he's a left-sided centre-back. I think his best position is as a left-back. Ashley Phillips, the youngster signed from Blackburn in the summer for $2 million. He's yet to develop. And Alfie Dorrington is a youngster who hasn't played a minute yet, but again, they've got big hopes for him. So when you look at Spurs' options at centre-back, you can understand why Dragujin is a man of interest because of the traits that Kev has outlined. He's sizable, and if you pair him with Mickey van der Ven, who has got that covering pace, you can see that really working in an Ange Postecoglou system. It's about whether they can get their man, though.
Right, we're now to our exclusive interview with Ivan Toney. He says he wants to repay Brentford by getting them out of the relegation battle during the second half of the season after the support the club showed him during his 8-month ban from football. Toney spoke in depth about his time out of the game.
Everybody's been supportive. I feel like, especially the club that was right behind me from the first bit, and like the fans behind me as well, which was a massive part. Even when I'm not at games, they're just singing my name, and I'll get loads of messages on social media and these kind of things. But yeah, like as a whole, everybody knows Brentford's a family club. They've been nothing but amazing to me throughout the whole situation. And I can't thank them enough, especially the fans. Like I said, they was behind me from the first minute as well. So it's kind of like I have a lot to repay.
Do you feel any kind of pressure in relation to Brentford?
Not really, no. It's no pressure. It's just obviously excitement to get back on the pitch, and obviously everybody knows at Brentford that I'll do my best to try and get the club out of the sticky patch we're in. But I don't feel there's no pressure. And even if there was, I probably wouldn't feel it, because I think that's what drives me forward. Like I said, Brentford, we've been here before. We know what it takes to get out of it.
Toney's potential return to football against Nottingham Forest live on Sky Sports Saturday Night Football on January the 20th. Still to come, the latest on Jadon Sancho's proposed move from Manchester United. Now to Jadon Sancho's future, and Borussia Dortmund remain in talks with Manchester United over the loan signing. There is a broad agreement on the loan fee and how the salary will be apportioned. Contractual details are still to be finalised. Right, Kevin, how will this news go down with the Dortmund fans from the kind of Germany side of things?
I think a bit of cautious optimism. It's a strange situation for Dortmund at the moment because they're not playing well domestically. They've done really well in the Champions League, of course. They won their group. But domestically, it hasn't worked out for them. They're a long, long way off the title race. They're not even talking about being in the title race. They're actually talking about our goal is to qualify for next season's Champions League. And we're only in January. So it shows you how much they've struggled. I think there is a feeling that they need a good news story, and this would definitely be that. I think he is somebody that Dortmund fans were so thrilled by when he was there before. It'll be interesting to see who moves aside for him, and I think it'll take a while to build him back up to full fitness. And at the moment, there's been uncertainty among the fans about the coaching staff because Edin Terzic is the head coach. There's been a lot of speculation about his position. And what the club have done is moved in Nuri Sahin and Sven Bender, who are former players, really good former players, and they've joined the coaching staff. So that's had most of the media attention, apart from this Sancho story.
Well, how good was he in his last spell at Dortmund?
Sensational. I genuinely think he was not just the goals, not just the assists, not just how he would affect a game, but a joyful player. You know, the whole thing's supposed to be entertainment, right? And he was absolutely that. You know, he would have performances that he would just... You know, the fans would be thrilled, and he would play with that free spirit. Now, he made it look easy, but what was around him was a good unit and good relationships with fullbacks and things like that. It was all about space and awareness of what was around him. He got to United, he didn't have any of that. And suddenly it was very, very difficult for him.
At Dortmund, you talked about the fullbacks and the space. At United, he was playing very different fullbacks. I think Luke Shaw's rebirth was all based on him being inverted and creating maybe less space for his wide man. And obviously, Aaron Wan-Bissaka's a great defensive right back, but going forward, he leaves a little bit to be desired. At Dortmund, Sancho was blessed to have Rafael Guerreiro on the left-hand side and Hakimi on the right-hand side, two of the best attacking fullbacks in the world. What kind of fullbacks will we be playing with when he goes back to Dortmund?
Yeah, it's a much more tricky situation now than it was then. As you say, he had that spell with Hakimi when he played on the right, and they were brilliant together. They got on really well off the pitch. You had Hakimi's pace, but Hakimi could also kind of underlap and make those runs, and it just created space for him. On the other side, Guerrero is such a smart player. He was never an out-and-out fullback, really, and he has played in midfield as well. So they had a great click as well. Now you've got a situation where at right back, they're really thin because of injuries. Mateo Moret has barely played for the past couple of years, really. Meunier's only just come back from injury. Rierson's out for a couple of months as well. And Marius Wolf is really limited going forward. On the left-hand side, they've almost got nobody. Bensebaini's away at AFCON. And, I mean, we're going to talk about Ian Maatsen, but they're desperate to bring somebody in. So you're kind of back to square one in that regard. So he's going to have to build those relationships pretty much from scratch.
Harry, how surprised are you that it hasn't worked out with Jadon Sancho at Manchester United?
It was a big surprise because, as you said, Kevin, there was so much excitement around his move. He was sensational at Dortmund, and he moved to Manchester United for a fee of £73 million, a 5-year contract. They really committed to his future. They thought that he was going to be a real star for them. And I remember when he joined, the quotes that came out of him were saying how he wants to be part of a team that would build so much success into the future, deliver the success that the fans deserved. And he wanted to be a key figure in all of that. And I think he had the ability, as he showed at Dortmund, to be able to do that. And then all of this is, you can't really anticipate that, can you? When something happens behind the scenes to this extent, not only was it behind the scenes, it got taken public. And when that happens, a breakdown in relationships is inevitable. And you can never prepare for that. You can never anticipate that because it's kind of so rare, isn't it? And it should never have, probably from your perspective, gone as far as it should have, where they want an apology. He's not willing to offer that. mainly, though, from a footballing perspective, just really disappointing because he does have so much potential. He is still only 23 years old. He has still got so much to give, and he wasn't able to achieve that with Manchester United. And for me, I don't think there's any real possibility, unless Ten Hag left and unless he wasn't manager anymore, that he will come back to Manchester United and be able to have a successful spell there, because that relationship breakdown has just gone so far. So definitely a huge surprise, definitely upsetting for Manchester United fans, because there was so much anticipation about his arrival. But ultimately gone too far now, and this feels like a really, really smart move both for him and for Dortmund.
I wanted to just push the conversation on a little bit more, though, into the future, Kev, to see sort of in the summer, should this go in the right way for Jadon Sancho in terms of reigniting himself, finding himself, getting confident. What sort of valuation do you think could be put back onto Jadon Sancho, given in mind, you know, Dortmund with how they are financially? They got a lot of money for him in the first place. There is no obligation or option to buy as it stands, just about getting him playing. What sort of fee do you think that he could attract?
It's really difficult because, you know, as much as somebody's prepared to pay, I know that that's a woolly answer, but effectively, if you just narrow it down to Dortmund, for example, OK, let's say he does really well. It's a big chunk of change for them, and they are generally pretty careful. And even, as you say, he's still a young player. So they might be tempted, but you're talking about a massive chunk of their summer budget. A lot of it would be dependent on whether they qualify for the Champions League.
They do it to us, Kev.
That's what they do.
They were posting up memes saying he's staying. Man United need to be firm.
They bring him in. They develop him. They sell him on. That's the business model.
But they could get him back for a very reasonable fee and then sell him on for a huge fee again. Though I mean, this could be if they can find that money. We know how good he can be.
I think there are hurdles. To leap over. I think as well, if you look at some of the wingers they've got, you've got Jamie Bino-Gittens, who they want to develop, who they gave a big, long contract to. So not necessarily they're going to be on the same side or blocking each other or whatever, but they've got to be very careful about him. Duranville is a guy they brought in, a young winger. He's barely played because of injury, but you wonder what they're thinking about him long term. It's possible that they could bring him in on a permanent basis. I just feel like financially, it's not necessarily a leap they would make. Now, if he does brilliantly and the fans are pushing for it, that may change things a little.
Yeah, we've had this debate this morning, but Kevin, very quickly, can you ever see Sancho playing for Manchester United again?
I'd like to think so, but I wonder if too many bridges have been burned. And just quickly, Dortmund, you don't want to indulge a player too much, but I think Dortmund were a bit softer with him. Edin Terzic knew that he would turn up late to stuff sometimes, so he would detail a couple of staff members just to give him a nudge, just to make sure he was turning up when he was supposed to. And I know you don't want to, pamper players and indulge them too much, but I think he was a bit less hardline about it. And ultimately, got a really good reaction out of him and a really good tune out of him. So maybe somewhere between those two extremes is where you want to go.
Now, Eric Choupo-Moting, having potentially been offered to Manchester United. Now, he has played in England before at Stoke, which we'll get to in a moment. But tell us a bit more about him, because we haven't seen as much of him as you have.
So I think with him, the really interesting thing is how he's viewed in England is probably different to how he's viewed on the continent. Because if you look at his spell with Paris Saint-Germain, he scored a very important goal for them in 2020 in the Champions League, scored a winning goal against Atalanta in the quarterfinals. He was seen as a good, solid squad member who could come in big games, do a perfectly good job. At Bayern, very much the same. Very popular in the dressing room, seen as somebody who's very much a cohesive part of that squad. And if you look at last season, they brought in Sadio Mane from Liverpool, but he was never going to be an out-and-out striker. Lewandowski made the move to Barcelona, so you're thinking, OK, there is no genuine centre-forward here, and they tried for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season to not have one. Then they panicked and said, well, we need a centre-forward, gave the job to Choupo-Moting, and he was brilliant. Scored goals all the way through the season, got a new contract, deserved that new contract, but then Harry Kane arrives, and now he's relegated to being a backup striker. But hasn't complained about that, has just kept on turning up, kept on training, kept on waiting for chances, and when he gets them, performing as well as he can. So I think he's seen by fans of Paris, fans of Bayern, in a much more glowing light than people see him in this country.
Well, Flex, you've been looking at his career, haven't you?
I have, and what we've seen is very much like what Kevin was just talking about the perception of Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting on this side of the continent versus the other side. And this is what is most synonymous with here in England. Obviously, a stint at Stoke under Mark Hughes and then going on to PSG and Bayern Munich. And I just wanted to take a look at his games to goals ratio, as well as his assists, his minutes per goals and his win rate. Of course, at Stoke, played 32 games. He was brought in by Mark Hughes and it didn't go the way that they wanted it to, which ultimately ended in Stoke being relegated. Just the 5 goals in the Premier League with 5 assists. And Andy Brazzell spoke about this yesterday on the Transfer Show, about maybe him being perceived as falling upwards, because he's gone from a relegated Stoke over to PSG, ended up playing 51 games, scored 9 goals, 3 assists, stepped in for a very much injured Edinson Cavani quite a few times and did score some fairly important goals for PSG. And then maybe the perception is maybe that's his ceiling. He can't go on again from there. Then he finds himself at Bayern Munich and played 107 times, scoring 38 goals and having 9 assists. And as we just heard there, last season, before the arrival of Harry Kane, scoring pretty much 17 goals, I believe, in the Bundesliga, and proving that he could fill a void on a temporary purpose. Now, the thing is, with Manchester United fans, I think it's about separating the emotion versus trying to see the logic behind a move for Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting. And that, I think, is the difficult thing. With so many problems arising at Manchester United, whether it be the player recruitment, not being able to shift players on, having short-term fixes to long-term problems in the striker area, that seems like a common theme that I think Manchester United fans become really frustrated with, and rightly so. But if you're looking at the short term, Rasmus Højlund's coming to Manchester United. He's 20 years of age, only scored 9 goals last year at Atalanta, really inexperienced. And with the unavailability of Anthony Martial and the injuries / illnesses or lack of quality, he's really, really struggling to hold that fort down by himself at Manchester United. And what we've seen with Eric Choupo-Moting, which is a common theme, is his ability to understand that he can be the piece on the side. And I know that sounds maybe disrespectful, but he can be the backup. He can be the player who will be good around the change room, who will understand his role and know when it is that he needs to come in for a short space of time. So based upon that, it would make sense for Manchester United to do this deal, in my opinion. However, the questions on the quality, the questions on the longevity and the questions of the planning for Manchester United fans are all there for us to be seen, and I absolutely agree with that. So it could be a situation where actually it does fit right for the short term, but a really frustrating situation for Manchester United fans to find themselves in again after the likes of Odion Ighalo, after the likes of Cavani, etc., etc.
Yeah, and Harry, he is 34, so Plex is right to talk about the longevity there. But Bayern Munich there, 109 minutes per goal. And that's very impressive.
Well, this is what Kev was talking about, the difference in perception between how we perceive him here and how perhaps they perceive him over there, because stats aren't anything to be sniffed at. And look, you mentioned there the difference between figuring out what's a good short-term option, what's a good long-term option, but surely the short-term option that you did sign was Højlund, and he has got to be given time. And I do think what this signing would perhaps do is take a little bit of pressure off of him, because there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of noise. We know what social media is like, and we know what football fans can be like. If a player's not straight away putting up the performance levels and the goals that you expect, then that does start to mount that pressure. So bringing Choupo-Moting, an experienced player, 34 years old, as you mentioned, yes, it's a short-term solution. No, I don't think a lot of Manchester United fans would be delighted, because they're like, oh, we're repeating this cycle where we do it again and again. But would it be relatively kind of good for the short term for Højlund as well? I think it could work. I just feel like, are you repeating the same cycle that you've had in the past, and will that upset people?
Right, I tell you what, we were talking this morning about the most bizarre signings ever, and there was a great response actually on X. So hashtag transfer talk, the most bizarre transfers in history, and we're going to be picking out some new ones as well and getting Kevin's input too. Next we'll be discussing Kylian Mbappe, Jean-Claire Todibo, Calvin Phillips and more. 24 days still to go. Plenty of times for clubs to get their deals done, but that will go quickly. It'll be February the 1st, 11 p.m. before we know it. Right, loads still to come with Kylian Mbappe. There are reports this lunchtime coming out of French media from his camp saying he hasn't signed an agreement with Real Madrid. OK, so they felt the need to spread that news, Kevin. But every window I ask this, and it never happens. Is there any chance that we'll ever see him in the Premier League?
I think there is a chance. This Liverpool link refuses to go away. Absolutely refuses to go away. And he hasn't made a secret of the fact that he's keen on Liverpool in the sense that it's a club that he really likes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen. I think Real Madrid is by far the most likely scenario. And I think he's continued to play this in the way that he's played it all the way through. He's been honest and frank when he's needed to be. He's kept his counsel when he's had to. Paris have tried to manoeuvre him, tried to say, right, you're not going to be in the squad then. That didn't last very long because they realised they couldn't allow him to rot on a bench for the whole season. So they've tried to push him. He's just been very serene, very calm. This is what he does. He's in control of his own destiny. And I believe him when he says, I haven't got any kind of arrangement. Real Madrid are not going to say anything in public. Real Madrid have been burned before. They're really embarrassed by not getting him last time. So they'll just keep their powder dry. I'm sure they're talking to his camp all the time, but they're not going to say anything publicly at this stage.
Kev, we talk about it always from a Premier League point of view, or we talk about it from a Real Madrid point of view, but this is the best player in France, the best French player who's potentially leaving the biggest team in France to join another team. And PSG would consider themselves a powerhouse. They've lost Neymar, or Neymar's left. Messi's not there anymore. Looks like Mbappe could leave in the summer. What does this say about the PSG project and what they try to build around these superstars?
I think it's already failed in the sense that trying to bring together Messi, Neymar and Mbappe, while it may have looked very attractive, was a complete failure. And the reason it's a complete failure is that's not how effective teams are built. You look at football history, that will tell you that all the way through. So it feels now, actually, semi by accident, they've got this team that potentially could do much better in the Champions League because you've got a coach in Luis Enrique who has a clear philosophy, who actually seems to have some authority. If you look at coaches gone by, I always think about Unai Emery. He got there, he had a certain way he wanted to play. The players cut him off at the knees within months. And from then on, it was all over, really, in terms of getting them to work the way he wanted. Now Luis Enrique has a bit more power. The club have pushed back against the idea of Neymar and Messi. But Mbappe is the true star there, which is what he wanted. Now, look, winning the Champions League with Paris would mean more to him than winning it with anybody. He's a Bondi boy, he wants to do it with his hometown club. But equally, that lure of Real Madrid is still there. So I still think it's up in the air. I still think he could stay. He could sign an extension. But what he's doing is he's keeping all of his options open and he won't let anyone, Paris, Real Madrid, Premier League, Saudis, won't let anybody strong-arm him.
Sergio Guirassy, we've talked about him quite a lot when we had a few shows in December as well, haven't we? Heavily linked with the moves to the Premier League, quite low minimum fee release clause, isn't there? It has gone quiet, but is that just because he's going to the Africa Cup of Nations?
I think it's a mix of factors, actually. So I think the Africa Cup of Nations is a big part of it. But there also does seem to have been a shift in the mood music in terms of him really enjoying playing for Stuttgart at the moment. They're in the race for the Champions League spots. So he's an undisputed starter there. So it's about whether he backs himself to play out the rest of the season with Stuttgart. I think he's still got a low release clause, slightly higher in the summer, but it is still competitive. So it wouldn't be blocking off his chance of moving to the Premier League in the summer. So I do wonder if he's just thinking, OK, I'll keep my options open, play a few more months in the Bundesliga, score some more goals, and then those moves will still be there in the summer.
So that's Guirassy. Next to him there, you've got Jean-Claire Todibo, another one who we've talked about for a few transfer windows. How good is he? We talked about Dragushin. What's Todibo like as a centre-back?
Really impressive, and really impressive because he's had some setbacks. Because he went to Barcelona far too early, ended up having a bit of a roadblock there. Went to Schalke, that didn't really work out. They were a team in a bit of a mess, in flux. He's had to really work hard to get to where he is now. And where he is now is part of a very successful Nice defence, which has been one of the best defensive units in the whole of Europe this season. They're still in a title race in Liga. And because of that, I suspect Nice won't want to do business in this window. But of course, if there are big offers from Premier League clubs, that might force their hand a little, but they do have money.
Kevin, what sort of impact, if any, could the likes of Sir Jim Ratcliffe have with this? Obviously, coming out of Nice, or still at Nice, but finding his feet at Manchester United, he is their player at Nice. Do you think he could be having some influence, sort of saying, listen, hang on to the summer. Also, I own Nice, so I want Nice to do well. I'll help you get that move and want to bring you over to Manchester United. I'm not saying that has happened, wishful thinking, but I'm just saying, what sort of impact do you think he can have on potential negotiations for him?
I think it's a balancing act. I think the main driver is, do they want to lose one of their best players halfway through a season where they're only, I think, 5 points off Paris in the title race? The answer to that is no. And they want to qualify for the Champions League as well, and he's a big part of that. So, while I'm sure he would want a top quality player to go to Manchester United, I think the main driver will be, I don't want him going anywhere now where he can still be very effective at Nice in this defensive unit.
That's Jean-Claire Tebow. If we move along to Calvin Phillips, no progress in the last week. Remains the same. Newcastle interested in him, Juventus interested in him. Both would be a loan deal. Where do you think would suit Calvin Phillips more? Newcastle, Juventus, or can you think of another club that might be perfect for him?
He's just got to play. Wherever he goes, he's got to play. And the problem is, where can he go where he's absolutely guaranteed to play? So Juventus may well bring him in, but they do have quality in midfield as well. That he wouldn't absolutely be nailed on to play every game there. It's like he keeps being linked with Bayern because Thomas Tuchel, knows the English market very well. But if he went to Bayern, he wouldn't be a lock there either because he's then got to deal with Goretzka and Kimmich and Lima. So it's a really tricky situation for him because, he's been linked with Newcastle, fine, but they've got a battle in midfield as well, and they've got some real quality players there. I know they've got a hole because of Tonali not being in there, but he's got to think very, very carefully about where he goes now, I think.
Just the other three on there, by the way, just a quick update from all of those. We believe that Fabio Carvalho now is more likely to go to Hull. He had his loan to RB Leipzig from Liverpool cut short. He's now expected to go to the Championship. Robin Koch is on there as well. Sky Germany reporting he's set to make his loan move from Leeds to Eintracht Frankfurt permanent. And another one to Eintracht Frankfurt, Sasa Kalajic there. He's gone from Wolves to Eintracht Frankfurt. So they are all the people on that screen there, the 7 players we've given you an update on. Right, on the way, we want to know what's the most bizarre transfer that's ever happened. It's up to you. Get in touch on X, #TransferTalk. Jordan Henderson wants to return to the Premier League this month, but his Saudi club, Al Ettifaq, will not allow the midfielder to leave on the cheap. They are aware he hasn't settled and that he's looking at other options, but any potential move would have to work for all parties. Right, Kevin, with this one, did you see this coming?
I said on here at the time he moved, I thought it was a big mistake, reputationally, because he, more than most players, has stood up for the LGBT community, has, been quite happy to put his head above the parapet and speak out on certain issues. I felt that move was a betrayal of that at the time, and it hasn't worked out. He's playing for a club that is playing poorly, has poor results, is in front of sometimes poor crowds, and the reputational damage, it seems to me, has not been worth it. And I felt that even if he'd been a moderate success in the first few months of his time there, I felt personally, and it's only a personal view, I felt it wasn't a move worth him making, because I feel like he's unnecessarily tarnished his reputation.
If he does come back to the Premier League, Harriet, how hard would the Liverpool fans see it if it's in a different Premier League shirt?
Yeah, I can't speak for everyone, but for me personally, unless it was to a direct rival club, I think a lot of Liverpool fans have made peace with the fact that he's no longer their player. Obviously, he was captain, enjoyed a hugely successful spell at Liverpool, often underrated at times, but he decided to move on. They got a £30 million fee for him, which I think at the time a load of Liverpool fans didn't expect. And if the midfield rebuild hadn't gone so well, maybe this conversation would be different. But the fact of the matter is they brought in Szoboszlai, who's been hugely impressive coming in, McAllister, Gravenberch. The midfield now for Liverpool is just ticking along so well and contributing to the fact that they are doing so well in all competitions this season. So I do think that the Henderson sting is kind of taken out, other than the reasons on the personal level, like Kev mentioned already. And that is what's probably more difficult to take, because he said he was going over for a legacy, he said he was going over to change the Saudi league and grow that league, and only a few months later it doesn't look like that's gone to plan. So I think in terms of playing for a rival club, Liverpool fans have made peace, but the reasons and his motivations are going, that might be where the questions are asked.
Very quickly, Kwaku, is there any way you can see him going?
You think about it, he's a Sunderland boy, but if you look at the Premier League, look at a team that could afford his wages, a team like Newcastle would be a potential landing spot. We know about Tonali's ban and how long he's going to be out for. Jordan Henderson could slot into there, but would that be a bridge that he's willing to burn in terms of going to Sunderland's biggest rival? It remains to be seen. Obviously, Newcastle with the Saudi links as well. So I'll leave that one to Jordan Henderson. I wouldn't like to be in that position, but with his astronomical wages, it's only a number of clubs that can pay that. And Newcastle, I don't know why you're smiling, so I'm one of them.
Smiling because you're talking utter nonsense. Right, I tell you what, funnily enough, we were talking about bizarre transfers. That would be one of them. Let's do that right now. What's the weirdest transfer that's ever happened? One that's taken you by surprise, something like that. We posed that question on the Sky Sports Instagram page yesterday, and it got thousands of you involved. This morning on Good Morning Transfers, it got loads of you involved as well. Keep them coming in. # Transfer Talk. Kevin, we didn't have you on this morning, so who have you gone for?
So mine is quite a personal one, really, and it's from a fan's point of view as a Liverpool fan. It was when Jari Littmanen joined Liverpool, because he was my favourite player at the time, and I didn't think there was a cat in hell's chance of getting him. It came from nowhere. He'd been an absolute legend for Ajax. He'd been an amazing player for so long. Came to Liverpool. I was so excited about it happening. But he had a reputation as being a man of glass, as they called him. He used to get injuries all the time, and that derailed it slightly. He was once injured at Malmo when a sporting director took a bottle top off a bottle. It flew off and hit him in the eye. That's the kind of freak injury, unfortunately, that he had to deal with.
Yeah, I don't think you can blame him for that one, but yeah, Jari Littmanen.
That only happens if you're really injury prone. That wouldn't happen to a normal player, would it?
It's true. Now, I know 3 of you had one this morning, but so many came to mind. Who have you gone for now, Flex?
I've gone with, at the time, Leicester's Esteban Cambiasso. That just really shocked me at the time. I remember that. And he came in 2015 and helped Leicester actually stay up, got their player of the season. This is a player at the time. 5 Champions Leagues, 5 leagues in Italy, a Champions League with Inter Milan as well, a whole host of Coppa Italias to go with it. And for him to come in at that age when his sort of contract ended at Inter Milan and come in and have that impact in the Premier League as well, at Leicester to help them stay up on the Pearson, that was absolutely fantastic. Although, when he did leave, they did go a lot further and actually win the Premier League. But definitely a fond player in the hearts of a lot of Leicester fans.
Yeah, I think you put a smile on their face with that one. Right, Harry, you've gone for a recent one.
I've gone for a few names that we've actually discussed into the loan market now, because Weghorst, when that happened, we were all kind of discussing that at the time, and we were just so surprised. I loved how he spoke about this move, because it was like the privilege of a lifetime, wasn't it? He was just delighted to be able to go there and be able to make an impact. But in terms of the loan market as well, some others that came to mind that we were talking about, Artemello, that deadline day signing for Liverpool, I think he left without ever making a natural appearance, so that was a bit of a random one. And then on a slightly different level, Ansu Fati coming across to Brighton, I think that was an incredible one, because it speaks to how far Brighton have come, that they're able to attract these players. A really clever bit of business, as is so typical of Brighton. I love the loan market. It just brings in so many random ones, and there are 3 examples of that.
Right, Kwaku.
Bojan. Do you remember Bojan to Stoke? He's supposed to be the next Lionel Messi. He's actually a distant relative of Lionel Messi. His 4th cousin.
You could do a whole part for Stoke, couldn't you?
But the thing is, and he kicked off that era of Stoke signing, I don't want to be too harsh here, but failed wonder kids. If you think about Bojan was supposed to be the next Messi, Mark Muniz was supposed to be the next Puyol. They signed him in 2013. Jadon Sancho, who actually went on to have a really good career at Stoke and went on to Liverpool to do good things. He's one of Klopp's favourite players in terms of rotational piece. Jesse Rodriguez, who was a Real Madrid wonder kid, and Afellay as well, who was amazing. So Stoke really did sign some interesting players that initially, if you're a big Football Manager fan, they were wonder kids, and they unfortunately didn't go on to amazing things. But Bojan to Barcelona was definitely a transfer that I remembered.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, Flex, Harriet, Kwaku, Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Good Morning Transfers is back tomorrow, 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock as ever. And this show, Transfer Talk, is back at the same time as well, midday until 1 o'clock. But there's plenty more to come today, because a full roundup of the day's news is on the Transfer Show, 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. And next, it is the Transfer Centre. We'll hear from the Chelsea boss, Mauricio Pochettino.